All right, what else can I say here? I guess thanking sponsors would be a good idea. We're at ThoughtBot, which is where I work, and I'll say thank you to ThoughtBot for hosting us here today. And then also SSB BART has been ongoing in their generosity in sponsoring food, which we failed to organize tonight. Sorry about that to all of you and to SSB BART group. But we try to get pizza. I'm glad that some of you found the sustenance you need. Mike?
Hello, everybody. Meetup, can you hear me okay? Great, okay. Hi, as you know, my name is Michael Zenger. But first of all, I want to thank Cameron, Thomas, and Sean for inviting me to the meetup. So before I go on and talk about the really important stuff, as you know, I am deaf, so I have what is known as deaf speech. So I want to be very careful about being sure that you can all understand me okay. Can you in the back understand me okay? Right. So if you don't understand me, you have the captioning. And I've had Miraba in the past, and she's been wonderful for me in the past, so I don't want to make her work too difficult. Okay. All right. But I will be sure to speak as slowly as possible. And also knowing that I'm going to be live streamed too. So that could be a very interesting experience for me. So raise your hand if you want me to slow down or speak up or whatever you can do.
Speak a little louder, we'll increase the gain on the mic.
Will you speak louder?
No, the mic's just going to the stream, it's not going to the... Oh, I see, okay. So
Okay. Are you okay? Can you hear me better now? Understand me better? Okay. I'll keep it up. All right. So now I'm very excited to see all of you. As you know, the title of this presentation is what you saw. What you saw is called the business case for accessibility. It will be more of my own perspective as a professor of business. So I'll tell you a little bit about myself and what I do. So with that, how to advance this? Okay, thank you. So as you know, I am a professor at Gallaudet University, which is a university for the deaf and hard of hearing in Washington, D.C. How many of you have heard of Gallaudet? Great, wonderful, so you know what it is all about. So I've been teaching there for 4 years now. And also at the same time, I am a doctoral student in marketing at Global Ecology Management. I don't speak French well. This is my best French pronunciation I can say, but that is in the south of France in Grenoble. So I live here in New York City. I teach in Washington, D.C., and I'm a doctoral student in France. So you might be wondering if I fly all the time. I don't. Through the miracle of technology, I've been able to do all the work. I go to Gallaudet 3 days a week. I stay in New York during the weekends. And one of the things I really love about my doctoral work is the fact that it follows the European model, no classroom work, unlike here in the US, which required that to go to classes for 2 years, which would have been very, very difficult in my schedule. So when I follow the European model, which you only have a faculty advisor, it really worked out very well for me. So I started 2 years ago in France. I went to workshops. And I have to tell you something about what called captioning. They captioned for me in France, and they did a wonderful job captioning for me remotely and following the French professors with their accent. They were perfect. So I can tell you how much I want to thank Word Code for their work. All right. So anything else I want to tell you about myself? So I'll tell you, okay. So before I go on and go into the presentation, I want to manage your expectation, the reason why you came here for the presentation. Right now I'm seeing this gathering. It's more of a narrative about my experiences And at the next set of ideas, I do not look at that as a traditional speech. It's going to be very loose, very unstructured. This is actually going to be my first presentation in which I will talk about my experience in academia. I've worked in the past in the private sector. I've worked in consulting in the disability market. But now, as both a professor and as a doctoral student, this will be a different perspective for me. So I'll be sharing I'm sure many of you come from a tech side, and one of the reasons I'm excited about presenting before you is that many of you work technology, some of you do coding, some of you do programming, some of you have started companies. So I'm really looking forward to hearing any ideas, thoughts, suggestions that you look for, and you'll probably be wondering why academia, why it is so important. Maybe some of you were found out. I certainly found out through my own experience. So what I will talk about, what I've discovered as I started going to academia, and then what we need to do going forward. Any questions before I go on? Am I all clear? Am I speaking slowly? Okay, good. So I want to tell you a little bit about my career. So you get a good feel of where I come from and what I'm looking for now. So first of all, when I was born profoundly deaf in both ears, 100 dB loss. So I had to learn how to speak very early on. I had hearing aids for about 30 years. And I got cochlear implants. So I've had cochlear implants in both ears for about 10 years now. And they've been really, really wonderful in terms of enabling me to hear and understand everything that's going on. One funny thing though is that when I got the cochlear implant, my speech declined. I got to learn how to new sound all over again. I've had to learn how to speak all over again. It was a very much an experience, a learning process. It's not perfect, but it's so much better than anything I've ever experienced in the past, so I really love it. So starting my career, my childhood story was to play for the Yankees. So that was what I was doing at that time. Everyone Mets fan, I'm sorry. But then pretty soon, my older brother told me that I wasn't very good. That was older brother too. It dash people doing. So after that, I had to figure out what I wanted to do in my career. So really, from much of high school and college, I had really no clue about what I wanted to do. So when I was in college, my first exposure to disability market and the disability study was when I worked in Washington, D.C. at the U.S. House Subcommittee on Select Education. And that it covered disability issues. At that time, the American with Disabilities, the ADA, was in process through Congress. It was a very exciting time. A lot of discussion over designing the ADA and kind of exposed to that. So I was very exciting. In fact, I was an intern. It didn't have much influence, but that being part of what's going on was really very exciting. So after college, I was a paralegal in Silicon Valley. So I had a lot of exposure to the tech side as well. I'll take a break. Okay, so I thought about going to law school myself, and that's why I wanted to work at a paralegal first, and then I worked in Silicon Valley for a law firm. I did a lot of IPO, Google, Netscape, AOL, so it was a very interesting law firm to work for, and I was sort of like that experience. I was not interested in law. I moved more towards business. So I wanted to get my MBA at the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. So after my MBA, my first post-MBA job was at Thomson Reuters, and I worked there for 4 years, four and a half years actually. I was in finance during that time. That was actually my first exposure to the corporate world. Though as a deaf person, figuring out to go in the corporate world was a huge challenge for me. And both my first business job and as my first job in the corporate world, we get exposed to a lot of conversation going on, and you get very easily lost in that experience. So I learned a lot of the experience, but also learned a lot about the limitation involved in accessibility from a communication perspective. So then right after Thompson, I got to work for a travel management company for 2 years, travel PTI. So it was a similar experience, but a smaller company, a little bit easier for me, accessibility-wise, but challenge from a corporate viewpoint. So after 2004, I was laid off in 2004 because they had to eliminate the division. So I went to a very interesting career path. You will see, for 8 years, I've been doing sales, market consulting, focusing on the disability market. I focused on strategy, working on market research, working with different companies, focusing on ensuring that businesses market themselves to people with disabilities better. So it was not my only job during that time. I really worked for 2 years, from 2004 to 2006. I'm consulting my own. And in 2006 and 2009, I worked for Amex. I worked in both in finance and marketing. And it was actually a wonderful experience for me. I really enjoyed my time at Amex. I had very talented people that I learned a lot from them.
Slow down a little bit.
Yeah, that's the problem with me. So when I get very excited about Amex, that's when I speak fast, so I slow down with that. That's how much I really enjoyed my experience at Amex. So Amex was very, very committed to making sure that I had enough access as possible by talking on the phone, by and making sure that interpreted and captioning with the meeting and so forth. But still, again, it wouldn't turn not a perfect environment because, again, with a huge company, you're dealing with tens of thousands of people from around the world. And so one of the important success factors of moving ahead in the corporate world, you have to know people. You have to know people in different environments. You have to be very, very close into our politics. So I was really kind of felt a little bit left out of that regard. Don't really focus on delivering what I was hired to deliver. And I think I did a pretty good job with that. So now, as you know, in 2009, that was a good recession. A lot of people lost their jobs. I lost their jobs in 2009. So I went back to consulting. I did some consulting through Amex. So I went back to consulting my own to 2012. Then I went to Gallaudet, my entry into academia for 4 years at Gallaudet. And at the same time, because I'm a tenure track, although I'm pursuing a terminal degree, so that's why I became a DBA student, a doctor in business administration, which is very similar to PhD. So I was very excited about that because it gave me the opportunity to apply what I have learned in terms of access issues from a business perspective and research that from an academic perspective. So my experience now has been 180 degrees different in academia as opposed to business. So that's sort of summarized in the XKCC curriculum, which we would yourself. So my experience for almost 15, 16, 17 years, I've been more on the business side. Even though you were wonderful, they will lean on you to do other work. They see you as a valuable and productive member. Now in academia, they talk all the time, they do a lot of research, they keep going on, and they really focus on theory, not so much on practice. And for me, that was a huge shift in perspective because I'm always the kind of person who likes to get things done. But when you focus on theory, it takes a long time to get it tested, to get everything done, and that's very frustrating for me. But I also learned a lot about what I could do as an academic to contribute to understanding better accessibility issues in the disability market. And I hope to use the time here to learn from all of you as well because I'm new myself to academia and So I'm talking from that perspective, so if you have any idea or anything, the floor is open. I look forward to that. So with that, any questions before I move on? Okay. So it's obviously, as you know, in
Sorry, I do. What's the difference between marketing for the general public and marketing for an accessibility market? What's the difference?
I'm drawing the captions.
Yeah,
We'll see what's the
it's just what's the difference between marketing to the general public and to people with disabilities?
Right, yeah.
I know
Right.
I'm the same, but yeah.
Okay, good question. Generally, the big difference is that anybody can buy food. Anybody can buy paper batteries, paper towel, and so on. All of us have the same basic need. For people with disabilities, they have an additional need, and that is because of their disability. So for me, I'm deaf. So I need to be able to hear, to have a hearing aid. So you're not deaf, I assume you're not deaf, so you can hear, so you don't need that. Some of those of you who have a disability, you have that need. So that's what I'm researching. So one of the frustrations I've heard from people, what I would call consumers with disabilities, is that businesses don't allow it now. I mean, some businesses do an excellent job of marketing to consumers with disabilities, but others don't allow do that. The main issue being that some businesses see the disability market as people that need to be helped. And I really disagree with that. There has to be a different perspective. And I hope to make that part of my research to demonstrate that there are more effective advertising approaches that would generate more sales from people with disabilities. Did I answer your question?
Doesn't the product also have to fit the market as well? I mean, you can do all the marketing in the world.
Doesn't the product also have to fit the market as well?
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah. So it's not just the marketing; it's also the product.
it's not just the marketing; it's also the product.
The product, not the product, absolutely the product. So that's actually one of my big reasons I want into the kind of work, because I'll tell you a personal experience. I was born profoundly deaf. So the only kind of hearing aid that would help me, a very powerful hearing aid, the blood let of sound into my ears. That before a cochlear implant. And the problem with that is that the market is so small. You're talking about 20 million people who are deaf, and about roughly 500,000 people are profoundly deaf. So much of the market is focused on developing hearing aids from mild to moderate deafness. But what about the very powerful hearing aid? I'm very excited about the prospect of putting programmable chips, very complex computer chips, to be able to help me hear better, to help me talk on the phone. When I talk to different people in the hearing industry, one person told me it's not a big enough market for it. It costs a lot of money and a lot of research, and invest so much into improving hearing aid for people with profound deafness. One thing that's a small market. I disagree with that. If you know the people, if you know the market, if you know profoundly deaf people better, you understand better what their needs are and what they want, they can better target them. It will not cost that much money to do the kind of research you need to do. That makes sense.
Do you specialize in folks that have hearing loss only, or do you also specialize in other things like physical disability? Like, for example, in your example, for a person who needs a wheelchair, do you specialize in kind of multifacets of the disability? And then additionally, do you also research the general product market and how folks who have disabilities are marketed to?
Okay, that's a big question, excellent question, but I'll try to answer everything. Now, first of all, as you know, going back to that career path, really from about 2004, 2012, by default, because I'm deaf, I had to work into the network. So obviously, I would focus on people I knew in that network, and I started branching out into different people in the particular market. But when I went to Amex, I went into as a networking consultant. I went back into consulting after 2009. So most of my work will focus on people who are deaf or hard of hearing. But now that I'm an academia, actually, my dissertation topic I really had. I'm not ready to share that with you, but I'm very excited about what I can find. But when I got everything perfect and done, it was sort of focused primarily on the deaf market, but you hopefully have applicability to other people with disabilities. So I hope to use that learning to be able to broaden into different branches of public disability, but for the most part, I focus mostly on the deaf market. One of the big challenges I'm finding now with marketing is that obviously, as you know, the disability market is very fragmented. So I'm focused on consumer behavior. So the big challenge for me is what are the common threads uniting all the different types of disability and what are the main differences. I think one of the big challenges for businesses is really understanding specifically what the average consumer with disability is expecting, because it's really very hard to remove all the individual factors specific to that disability and try to pull out the common thread. I could find that really much of what my research is on.
Good answer.
And then you also ask about, so I think there was another part of the question.
I forgot to. How do you also research the macro macro product market?
The thing with the product itself, I mean, I really focus more on strategy, not so much on product design, really more on market research in the disability market, not so much on product design. Okay. So obviously, as you know, how many of you have a PhD or doctor? Okay. So obviously, as you know from your experience, you probably work in government or the private sector, as you work on the academic side, so you know a lot about the scientific method, right? But when you talk about scientific method, you have a hypothesis, you do a review of all the prior theories, and so on and so forth. But that really, I'm really getting ahead of myself here. So in the business world, you know all about the white paper, important analysis, and that's pretty much the bread and butter that contribute a lot to business success. You see a lot of those in your work, both in the disability market and in whatever you're doing in your industry, are very popular, very effective, and persuasive, and they can certainly drive business success. And in a way, they're very important to my consulting work because I wrote a white paper on captioning myself with another person, and so I rely on other white papers from around the disability market to help drive my work. So obviously, one perfect example of a very popular report, you may have seen that report, the E.T. Carney. You know about the E.T. Carney report about 5 years ago. What do mature customers want? Mature customers being the baby boomer generation. They were thought to have disability during that time, and most baby boomers are retiring. So they did a huge report on the potential of the baby boomer generation and what people and how much commonality they have with the disability market. So they interviewed 3,000 people in 22 countries to find what they want in retail and packaged goods. They spent $8 trillion in 2010, $15 trillion in 2020, which is a huge number. They did the kind of number that drives the white paper. Really, if you were a senior executive looking at that, if you did a number that they love, they would think to themselves, what can I do to target that market? So some of the findings they had is loyal to brand, as well as expand on how the products, and they turned out by advertising. So I'm really focusing more on what they found in the white paper. And so another.
What is a health-oriented product? Health-oriented product? What is that?
Medicine, some product that gives you health benefit. Another example of an analysis is the return on disability index. You probably know about fifth quadrant and analysis. How many of you know about Rich Donovan? Yeah, he's a person with a disability who worked for Maryland for a long time. The one who started it on from analyzing the stock market. So he developed an index following the stocks of businesses that have marketed themselves very successfully to the disability market. So it indexed the companies based on 21 factors, and they applied an index to highlight the performances. And what he's trying to do is to highlight the economic added value of companies that commit themselves to provide an accessibility and inclusion for people with disabilities.
Could you repeat the name of the individual?
Yeah, I should put it down.
Russ?
Richard, R-I-C-H, Rich Donovan, D-O-N-O-V-A-N.
Great, thank you.
Is that it? The question to ask is, does it contribute to a better understanding of the value of the disability market? How does it help businesses to in fact get better returns? And last of all, do any research support this? So the big thing that I learned when I became a doctoral student is we look at the phenomenon and theory. So can any of you tell me the difference between a phenomenon and a theory? Yes.
So a phenomenon is something you can observe. A theory is something you can use to account for what you observe.
The theory is something that could prove what is being observed. Yes, yeah, right. Because that's what what we're talking about. One thing that I never really thought about until I went to school is all these white papers, all these analysis, all these reports that I hear about the example of observing phenomenon. They have almost nothing to do with theory. So with phenomenon, it observes, it describes, though it is some sort of cause and effect. It takes some factors, looked at the result of this factor, and they explain that to you. That's what a phenomenon is. With theory, it's very different phenomenon. It tests a phenomenon. You assume that A will cause B, and you want to prove that there is a solid relationship between A and B. If you go back to, so we have an index of about 100 companies that have identified 21 factors. What the core criteria that they use to determine the 21 factor. They probably set it on a table. I mean, I don't know. I know that it live stream and recorded, so I'm sure he will watch that. So I'm sure he have a very much a method for picking out those factors. But until the academic research that determines that these factors are very valid and support, and you can prove that companies have improved their performance based on the connection to the index. So you have to have some sort of theory to test the relationship between. So let me give you an easy example. I go back to the 80 County report. They talked about current advertising. So they talked about that was observed. What kind of advertising will really help them? So that's great. So you talk to a focused group of people who say, I like advertisement A better than advertisement B. So you put the advertisement out, but you don't know if that will work. Maybe you try that advertisement did not work. You have to go back and keep testing that again. So simply saying that they are turned out, we will probably not tell you that much. We do know that people who are older like to be treated with dignity. They like to be treated with independent, we try to structure advertising on that, but until we can prove with academic research that an advertisement that focuses on dignity and independent that translates to better sales, we've never, right? So, how much time do we have? Okay. Yeah, I want to give you time to talk, so I'll try to go quickly. So, if you think about the academic contribution to business, it's a good summary of what academia has done to business over the past 50, 60, 70 years. In finance, we have portfolio theory and derivatives. Information management, we have Q theory and programming. In medicine, we have pacemakers, MRI, that came from research and academia. And so a lot of research into accessibility come from that area. Now, market and science, which is what I do. Segmentation, survey models, consumer search, they all came from academia. And that drive a lot of what businesses start today. So, if we go into disability in academic literature, so most of the contribution to the whole disability movement and the whole post-toward accessibility came from accessible solutions, design, legal rights, that's a big part of that, civil rights, service solution, that most of what the contribution came from academia. But what about marketing? Financial value, business practices. When I was doing the research into disability in business, this is what I found. As a business professional who had worked in finance and marketing for almost 20 years, moving into an academic environment, I was very excited about what kind of research I could find on the disability market as related to business. So one of the big things that you do when you start a PhD or a degree program is to pick a topic, find a topic for your dissertation. That's a big thing, about 6 months, the topic keeps changing over time. And one of the first things that you do a lot of research, read a lot of academic articles, do a lot of keywords, search by disability, search by business, search by accessibility. There were a lot of academic articles covering that. There were almost no academic papers on marketing, finance, and business. So there was a huge gap. There was a huge gap in the research. That made it very, very difficult for me to find a topic because one of the things that you do in academia, you find a gap in the theory. You don't simply copy somebody's paper. You have to contribute to theory on your own. You have to have primary research on your own. So to do that, you have to find a gap. It's a huge gap for me. So the big issue was, what kind of theory should I pick for that? So most academic literature that address disability in the context of business are focused on inclusion in the workplace, employment, proving that if you hire a person with a disability, you add value to the business, product design. But in marketing strategies, targeting, segmentation, there's not very much on that. So that's why I'm hoping that it's a good extent of idea. We've been working in programming, coding, been involved in tech for a while. So one of the things that I do hope going forward is what do you look for academia? What kind of idea can you contribute? What can I offer to you in terms of how we can best push forward the idea of giving consumers with disabilities better choice, better product, better accessibility, and proving to businesses that they can definitely profit, they can definitely get value from marketing to people with disabilities. Yes.
So, from an academic exercise perspective, companies that market and specialize in communicating appropriately with the disability market do well, right? We know that. But how could your study isolate that their success is solely predicated on their ability to market to that channel. Best of breed companies recognize and understand that there are multiple markets that need to be communicated to, whether it's African Americans, Latinos, Asians, the elder market. Best of breed companies recognize and do this. You know, when we talk about theory, etc., does your study over-index the impact that that one particular messaging may contribute to their success?
Okay.
And that's a devil's advocate question.
Yeah, I understand. Now, first of all, when you bring up the African American market, the Latino market, you avoid one excellent point that I want to go back to. People with disabilities are one of every 5 Americans have a disability. The African American market are almost the same size, about roughly, I think, 15%. So there's been a lot of academic research on the African American market, almost none on the disability market. So that's a big, though, there's a lot of, that's why we're way behind, but also a lot of opportunity in that area. Now, in response to your question about how do we isolate that, right now, my focus in my dissertation is really focusing more on consumer choice. Though right now, I'm not quite ready to share that information as well. But certainly, the idea of comparing businesses that are perceived as not marketing themselves well to people with disabilities, and those that do a better job of that, how to compare that. I can tell you, I'm not doing that right now, but it's certainly one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot in the future. So when I finish my doctorate and get that done, I'll do more work on that. So if you have any idea, you want to contact me with your personal idea, I would love to talk to you about it.
I mean, I look at a company like Procter & Gamble. They do an exceptional job with vertical marketing, and certainly do just as great a job with individuals with disabilities. But I also know that Latino marketing, right? I mean, it's interesting to look at the success of them and to over-index their business success to the fact that they are successful in appropriately communicating with that vertical.
I wonder, one thing we have to be very careful about. When we talk about basic need, food, soap, everything, we all have a similar need. I don't think it matters whether you have a disability or not. When we talk about product, like outdoors with disability, that we focus on. How about Procter & Gamble have any product that focus on people with disabilities?
Everyone needs
yeah, but that was sort of the focus because I want to be able to demonstrate that there are some businesses that have the technology to develop a product that will benefit a certain group of people with disabilities, but they do not have the incentive, or they do not see the value in that. We can show them through, I'm sure on the one side, white papers, or on the other side, academic research, that we can show that, yes, we'll benefit from that. That'll be huge, I hope.
Thank you.
Okay. So that's the last slide. So what it needed going forward to advance research into marketing to people with disabilities. I found a few ideas I had going forward. The buying power of consumers with disabilities, I call them CWDs, because I want to call them a consumer. The people who buy something. How does that influence business strategy? What are the most effective ways to advertise the consumer with disabilities, which connect to what we're talking about here? And given the huge size of the disability market, what can businesses do to market their product better to consumers? It's a huge question, many unknown, but that's where I end the presentation now. So I know you've been involved in tech for a long time. You don't have a lot of experience in academia for the most part, but if there are anything that you want, thought, idea, that you think that will really help going forward, that'd be good.
I was just curious if there is a streamlined resource guide for the appropriate communication that you're talking about. Because I think about something like the film Me Before You, which is a film about a man and this was a big problem among advocates in the disability community, but a lot of my students who aren't advocates and maybe just, high school kids were really excited to see that same film. How do we know, and I'm saying this as a person with a disability, how do we know what is effective marketing or communication, and how do we measure effective marketing in a quantitative way? I'm just curious. Because to me it seems very subjective from one community to the next. And even within one community there can be divides as well. So,
Well, you talk.
that's a big question.
So are you talking about effective marketing in general, or are you talking about the film?
Oh, effective marketing for people with disabilities. How do we measure that? Is there some kind of standard? You talked about the DEI, which obviously measures how companies are doing, but I'm not sure how much they're specifically measuring communication in that rating system. So I just wondered if you had some way to measure these things.
Well, we talk about effective market. What kind of medium are you talking about? You talk about TV or magazine or porn. I mean, there are many different mediums. Let me just preface that by saying I come from a market strategy perspective, from market research. I don't come from an advertising or from targeting as well. But I can tell you that in terms of measuring how effective are you talking about publicizing the film? What are you talking about?
That's just one example, and honestly, it's not a terribly important example in that everybody can have their own opinion about a film. But I just wondered if there was some kind of rule book, because I could imagine that if you are a business trying to be one of the people that is effectively communicating, you wonder, well, how do I do that? Where do I see what's working and what's not working?
One of the ways when you develop an advertisement or you do a marketing strategy, you kind of start out by doing some test. You can do a pilot, you can go to a focus group, or a pilot test, or go in one specific city, right? And so with that, and then you can see what different type of advertisement work, and then based on one way to do that. If you have a focus group, you do a lot of interview, then there's a two-way communication. That's one good way to assess that a certain advertising method is more effective than another. I just feel that not enough research is being done. There's been a lot of work being done on developing advertisement. There's been a lot of different advertising methods, but I don't think there's been a standard understanding of what some works and what's done. Because now there are some advertisements that don't connect. They just don't work. No.
I have one thing. How do you gave the example of African Americans are marketed to in a certain percentage, but for people with disabilities, it's a very fragmented market. As you can see here, there's people who are deaf and blind, and people who use wheelchairs, and people who use canes, etc. Do you do a macro view of your different segmentations and modeling versus like people with disabilities versus not people with disabilities? Or have you considered segmentation down to a more micro level? Like if you are a paraplegic versus a quadriplegic, if you are minimally deaf or moderately deaf versus profoundly deaf?
I'm doing macro right now, and one of the challenges of my dissertation is to have a certain hypothesis that applies to, if it works out that it can apply to almost anyone with a disability, but from a more practical point of view, you have to start somewhere with that hypothesis. And what the problem I have is you have many different segments and many different needs. So if you try to test maybe even 3 different markets, wheelchair, blind, deaf, how do you remove the confounding variable that are very specific to people who are blind versus those who have a wheelchair? And with one market, you could do that. But when you try several markets, it gets exponentially more difficult as well. So what I'm doing that on a macro level, and actually in my work, my topic, the theory that I'm testing to apply to disability in general, but have to focus on one specific market to get started. I don't have the time or the resources to test all the different markets, but I hope that when I'm done with that, and based on the finding and the conclusion that would hope to do it all over again with different markets, will encourage future researchers to contribute to the work. And that's why I'm very excited about that, because in the academic world, there's a field called disability studies. Some of you may have heard about that professor who teaches disability studies. There are 3 specific universities that provide graduate degrees in the midst of disability studies. But most of what they do is focus more on access and inclusion, and they're not as much on the business side. So if I can highlight the need bringing business theory for the disability market on a par with theory in the African American market, in the Latino market, and even by gender and so forth, that there will be some exciting new discoveries that I hope more people will be interested and do more work in that area, because I can't do everything myself. We'll go ahead.
She raises an interesting point, though. If you go to Verizon in New Jersey, or if you go to AT&T in Texas, you go to Procter & Gamble, you walk into their marketing department, we'll have a team of 15 people that specifically dedicated or focused on Latino marketing initiatives, a dozen people that are specifically focused on African American marketing initiatives, Asian American marketing initiatives, you name it, right? But when you look at the disabled marketplace, there's no representation in those marketing departments. But I almost wonder if that's a matter of the splintering of the marketplace. Would you have a marketing department where you have individuals that cater to individuals with visual disabilities, with mobility-related disabilities, with hearing-related disabilities? From an education perspective, it almost, to your point, I think it almost splinters to the point where corporate America has a difficult time determining how they'll get a return on that investment of such a significant market. It's a great question, and I wonder.
Well, I think personally, I think personally the awareness of the Latino market has really come to be over time. It wasn't like the Latino market was heavily marketed toward in the 1980s or the early 1990s.
Sure.
It became apparent, but I think your work involves the apparent need and awareness that this is a valid market, and then how to segment toward it.
I just wanted to elaborate on that. Maybe I would question, is there really a need for a market in a business plan? Why not have people of different abilities within each market of Latinos, African Americans, and different races? Because I think you gave a perfect example about products being a need for everyone, and people with disabilities have the same need. And if you're differentiating or putting a sector or department that says this is for people who have blindness or deaf, I don't think it's really doing any better.
I would have. Go ahead.
I mean, just elaborating on that, I'm wondering if you might be able to touch on sort of the manner in which these products are being marketed. Because certain people with disabilities, if it's print advertising, then somebody who might have a hearing disability in the Latino market might just be the same. So, yeah, I mean, I'm just curious how it might be different than for the mainstream of these approaches.
I'm sorry, I'm not doing the microphone over here. Just didn't catch everything that you said.
I'm sorry, can you hear me now?
You can unmute me. Sorry.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, I was wondering if you could elaborate more on the different marketing techniques for people with disabilities, and also just kind of adding to the conversation about the different segments, because and I'm just hypothesizing here, but perhaps if there's somebody who might be hearing impaired and Latino, if we're talking about print advertising, then perhaps it may not make a difference. So I'm just curious, like how exactly, like on a tactical level, that might work.
What I do know is that, following up to your point as well, that we have different businesses that focus on a specific type of disability market, and they have optimized the ability to target that market. I mean, that's like for example, I think with AT&T, they were focusing on people who are deaf and hard of hearing as well, because they do telephone as well, but they don't focus on blindness and so forth. And then other companies have products that are specifically for specific disability type. But in terms of technique and everything, I don't think I can speak to that as well. But I would like to know that, going back to everybody's point about fragmentation, is that it's very, very hard to standardize the code. I'm sure you think to yourself, what's the point? What's the point of going macro as well when there are so many different specific needs for different segments? And I agree with that. I agree that they need to be much better understanding based on the type of disability and as to how to better target themselves to that specific segment. But I also argue there are some common thread across the entire disability market that we can learn from. So that sort of goes back to how I picked my topic, my dissertation. I sort of to focus on a very one type of the market, or focus on a whole broad, a whole disability market. And so when I'm making my case, when I defend my dissertation, I'm a doctoral in business administration. I have to show that my work has practical application. So I'm sort of looking from a political perspective that I want to show that has a huge value for a big market. I would hope that after I'm done with that, I focus more specifically on the macro level. Don't worry about that.
I think the work that you're doing is great. I think there's some examples of this that need to be done. But I also think there's something I refer to as the spillover effect, which ultimately helps and sort of navigates into the world of inclusive design. So Comcast is probably as good an example as anyone. They built the talking guide, the voice remote, specifically as a disability initiative for individuals with visual disabilities. They put that initiative together. The beautiful thing about that functionality is they can track usage, and the usage of Comcast customers that use that functionality at least once a month is 15 to 18 times larger than the visually disabled population in the United States. They see a massive return on that investment, and they've significantly looked for other areas where they can continue to make investments because they know they get a macro effect across their entire user population. So I think that there's just a lack of data in the marketplace, and I think in your studies, connecting with the folks at Comcast, which I'd be happy to do, might be beneficial to see some of that data.
Yeah, I love that story. I love telling that story myself because there are so many different markets that have a spillover effect.
That was not a usability-related initiative. That was a disability marketing and usability-related initiative. It was exclusively that. So,
I guess my question was related to that point, that I think one thing that's always come up in my work in technology is people, if they are validating a technology feature, they wanted to actually know, well, how many people with disabilities are using this, accessing this. So to the Comcast point, and I'm assuming the marketing point, having that be like a tracked data analytic has always seemed to be a conversation point of like, well, that's private information. I've always heard different perspectives of that, and I'm just curious if that's something that's come up of like, how does a company track that, or what are ways that they can gather?
In the Comcast example, I can just tell you that they track and they can detect who uses that functionality. They know the numbers of Americans, and they can extrapolate that number to their subscriber base, and they know that the percentage of their user base that uses that functionality on at least a monthly basis significantly exceeds the generalized population of their consumer base that has a visual disability. So they've had to extrapolate some numbers, but it's significant. It's not small, right? It's not like, oh, it's close. It's like 10x. So the fact is that population benefits by that functionality, but so does everyone else.
But could they say that that came, like the marketing, like I guess tying that into, how can they tie that to, that they did market that or make an initiative to that?
Right, like how, like they know that they have a massive population of people using it, but do they know how many of those people are blind? And do they know how many of their users are blind to begin with?
Absolutely
so they can
not.
decide on making
Absolutely
a
not.
feature.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
this comes up in web development with like segmentation and analytics. Is like you have demographics for all of the populations that have been described tonight, except for disability, and maybe that's appropriate. Maybe that's the wrong way of thinking about it in terms of segmenting. But there is a question mark there. Like how do you measure and how do you hypothesize about future development in the context of disability?
Another question for me. Well, we can enter the question, but it's a very exciting question. I do not talk to some people who are expert in big data, not of the disability market, in big data. And they do say that if you really want to understand what people with disability do, what do they do, how do they buy things, what do they do every day, and probably pretty much find that information through Quora, what they do, what are the buying habits, what do they use the internet for, all of that is already out there in the big data. And so how many of you work in big data? Anybody work in big data? I want to probably be thinking about, I'm curious about whether there's some opportunity involved in assessing just from using the internet, identifying people who are blind. Yeah, maybe you can expand on that. Again, so.
Oh my goodness. So one of the examples that we have been working on, we have a client that is targeting people with physical disabilities. They're a physical rehab company. One thing, now granted, we're not focusing on screen reader users, but we are trying to target if a keyboard browser is using it, meaning you're using the tab key, arrows, etc. And unfortunately, because there's no indication if you are using adaptive equipment like a forehead keyboard, or if a forehead sensor for your keyboard or eye tracking keyboard, or if you're using the tab key, we're trying to figure out if medical professionals, clinical trials, researchers are also using that tab key because that's how they're used to their old systems, versus people who are using it as a need. And it's really hard because we're just trying to even find the mechanism to detect that. And then after that, we're working on coming up with a surveying model that would allow us to do kind of some very rudimentary conjoint analysis with people that they have internally there. But because we have a user base that we know that is literally located within the physical rehab company to provide us the data, then we can look at it as external and externalize it further. It's weird because if you start to work in this kind of field as a person with a disability, you're like, yeah, but you can track everything else. I can track if a person with a wheelchair is on new mobility, but I can't track for sure what type of disability they have for sure. I can't track any of that stuff. And then you look at the legality of it and so forth. Like, is it good to track people with disabilities? For me, I'm like, no thanks.
But there's a definitive nature of it too, right? We talk about big data, and big data likes absolute numbers. So a marketer knows that 15.6% of the US population is African American, right? So you can market to them. I will tell you, go to the World Health Organization, go to BLS, go to any data set, and find out what percentage of Americans live with a disability. I will tell you that you will find a range between 4 and 25%.
Well, you're looking also at self-identified disability. A lot of people who are disabled don't necessarily identify as disabled. And then,
Exactly.
and then to kind of go back to your point before of product design and then tracking the data off of it, to go to a very rudimentary version is the simple curb cut. It's provided as for something for people with disabilities to navigate up and down sidewalks. But are you also able to do the data of people with wheelchairs who are using it, mothers with strollers who are using it, UPS drivers,
Me with
so
my
forth?
luggage when I'm checking into a hotel, right? I mean, I use it.
I'll say webcasters carrying a lot of equipment.
Bravo. But yeah, it's really hard to segment out need versus need for the thing that you have designed and that you are trying to segment out versus all people that use it. You're using the example of, I've done product design X meant for disabled folks, but the entire broad public loves being able to talk to the remote. It's creepy, but it's awesome. Like,
Kids
hello,
love it.
remote.
I mean, that's all they
It's
do.
me again.
There's another area that I don't think we've talked about, which is the social acceptability.
Oh, can you come up and
Sorry.
talk? Yeah.
Like move the.
Oh yeah, we can move it.
Yeah, so there's a social acceptability of disability, being disabled, identifying as disabled. I think there's a new show on ABC called Speechless. I don't know if anybody's seen it. And I think just the fact that show is there makes it more socially acceptable to be in a wheelchair or not be able to speak or any of those things that are portrayed in that fictional drama. Anyway, I was just wanted to point out that social acceptability is huge. I think shows like that will help you in your efforts to market, possibly. Anyway, yeah.
Right. I mean, for the most part, social acceptability, I mean, one of the big themes, half of the big issue in the disability world. And I think, I mean, when you think about the analogy of a lamp, so if you're on your wheelchair, and then you go to a theater, and then you have to take a side end on, and so, yeah, of course you have access, but it means you have to separate yourself, you're going to go around. So if it's more socially acceptable to integrate everything, I mean, it's not a little thing really, but it's more of the kind of thing where there are more opportunities for people with disability to interact with others without judgment or thinking, oh, you're disabled and everything, but you are doing the same thing that. And just seeing the lamp up there, we will probably show to businesses that they probably don't benefit doing research, R&D, and technologies that would have a spillover effect, not just for people with disability, but for everybody. So there's more of an incentive to think in the mindset of including everybody in the design. I mean, I don't have any experience with the architecture of developing usability. Some of you have done that as well, but I'm sure you think about that when you design a product. I would love to talk to you about that. I'm sure that's something I would like to see more and more businesses do.
I mean, if we look at this as an algebra equation, I just always feel like something's missing, right? We live in a capitalistic, competitive business environment. companies, Coca-Cola, Procter & Gamble, Comcast, they spend hundreds of millions of dollars in segment marketing to all kinds of marketplaces because they're able to clearly define that they get a return on an investment. If they didn't, they would not do it. I can absolutely assure you, right? I mean, and we've looked at the numbers. I mean, individuals in America that live with some form of a disability that are impeded from fully accessing content could be as high as 15 to 17%, right? It significantly outweighs any of those particular markets. Why is it so difficult to get the clear path to the return on that investment? I've sat in boardrooms with C-level executives that have told me, how many people are blind in the United States? BLS tells us it's X. How many of them use a screen reader? I can't tell you. Well, if you can't tell me, then I'm not going to spend the money to make my info because I'm not going to get a return on that investment. But that same executive greenlights.
There's something you skipped over there, which I think is important. That they're not going to spend the money on the infrastructure to what? To support. Like, I think there's something we're dancing around here, which is access versus marketing. And this is something that I keep coming back to, which is when we talk about building features for the web, when we talk about detecting screen readers, like, are we actually talking about access, or are we talking about selling and marketing? And I'm curious, you're the one that brought it up.
Well, yeah, you can look at a user agent and detect right away if somebody's located in Latin America, what version of operating system they're running, if they have an updated Android 442, and they're sitting in that. I can detect what display size they have, but I don't have a UA for a visual display unit, anything like that. Right. And the hard part is without that qualitative data from like every other source, every other tidbit I can pick up, it's really hard to justify the business need besides your lovely person for advertising or marketing towards people with disabilities, and you have qualitatively associated.
And to your point, I didn't skip that point. I'm staying on focus to what the topic of the dissertation is, right? I mean, this is a carrot and stick issue, right? I can tell you that a significant number of companies out there are readily addressing this as a topic, mainly because they've been hit with the stick. And many of them were not presented with the carrot, or they didn't see fit to jump at the carrot. They said, we'll take our chances on the stick, right?
So I have another theory then to respond to your question, which is, recently I saw an article about, on Facebook, it's possible to exclude groups based on race and gender from your marketing, but you can't exclude white folks. And it's just this question of like...
Oh, this is like a societal...
It is. Absolutely. Like, if you're talking about identifying as a group, you also put yourself into an area where you can be excluded. And I wonder how much of that is here. I'm coming as a person who doesn't identify with a disability, but it seems to me like maybe there's something there.
Sorry, can I just say, but you wear glasses to correct your vision. So, in that sense, at least you are disabled.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yes, I take your point.
That's my point.
I don't
It could be 50% or it could be 8%, right? That there is exactly the issue, right? Is I use these. My wife uses closed captioning because she doesn't want to miss certain things, right? Would she define herself as disabled? Most likely not. But when we talk about the tangible number of, I make this investment to approach market X, what is that? Do I count? When I use my Mac, I'm doing this all the time. Does that make me in that issue of to say, I don't know. And it's that nebulous nature of it all, where I don't think that CEOs or marketing departments or technologists sit down and do it. I had an interesting conversation at a trade show a couple weeks ago. I had a head of a technology-related company who's in the HR space, runs career sites, and he said, IE6 gets used by about 2.5% to 3% of the US population. My development cycle and my testing methodology, when I do a new release in technology, dedicates 75 times more hours and energy than we do into accessibility testing, and that's 15% of the US market. To which I said, why? It doesn't make any sense to me. That's why I said this is an algebra equation that's missing X. And why is it so complicated? I'm sorry to get fired up about it, but to me this is like, I'm missing the X.
I mean, for me, everyone business for long now. that comfortably, I mean, you talk about the free market, you talk about the invisible hand guiding profitability, quality, and so forth. But for me, you talk about marketing, you talk about access, you talk about getting someone to get things done, or companies that really are very passionate about doing that. I love those people who really put a lot of their work into providing access because they want to do it. They want to give something back to the community, and they're very important. I love like that. But what about the people who really need to be have an incentive to provide access to as many people as possible, to provide come from a free market perspective? If you can shift the perspective of that, you can prove that you design product a certain way, they include as many people as possible, they can see a clear return on investment, that they have an incentive to do it. So, so we have any questions?
I think on that note, we're going to pause for tonight, but I think I speak for all of us when we say we're looking forward to the results of your research. And,
All those things you said you couldn't share.
Come and talk to Mike afterwards, and stick around for a bit. We should be all out of here by 9, so that gives us half an hour. Yeah, thank you all again for coming. This has been great.
Thank you.